Australians as a whole seem to be a little bit more disengaged than other citizens with the political process. Australians seem to be sort of having this collective disease that is the political apathy of the Australian population.
It's very difficult to get people politically motivated when they're rich. And no matter how poor you are in Perth, you're still in the richest 5% in the world.
Most people are astute enough to know that the so-called political process that's embodied in Parliament and parliamentary campaigns doesn't represent them, doesn't represent any real potential for change. And the consequence of that is people feel very, very powerless. They sort of feel, well, look, I hate what's going on in, for instance, Gaza. It's horrible, but there's nothing I can do about it.
At the moment, we're ruled by, on the sharp end, the police are out there, the army are out there. They're the sharp end. But the other end is basically what Noam Chomsky calls a manufacture of consent, what Gramsci calls hegemony. That's things like your schooling, the media, the books you read, all the kind of things where common sense says, look, you don't need to be a ratbag revolutionary, things are okay. Just, vote for Kevin Rudd or vote for John Howard or vote for whoever, write a letter to your MP and things will be okay.
In the early 90s, I found myself in the Middle East, and I wasn't there for any political reason, but while I was there, I went to East Jerusalem, and that was in the middle of the Intifada, and was able to see firsthand what the state of Israel was all about, and even though I'd had a sort of political sympathy for the Palestinian cause, to actually see what was going on in Israel, particularly to be able to see firsthand something that struck me very forcibly, and that was that Israel was almost indistinguishable to me from the South Africa that I'd been in the 1960s, the height of the apartheid regime. The only other circumstance I'd ever been in which you can get on a bus in the third world and get off in the first world.
The Australian government and all the major Australian political parties have supported the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. You, as a resident of Australia, are expected to support that because they do. I don't, and I have an obligation to history to make a mark, to make it be known that not everybody in Australia supported the massacre in Gaza.
I think it's like any other city, really. There's always a certain layer of people who are interested in politics, who are interested in political theory, who are switched on to their world around them and will be engaged in politics. That always happens. There's always a certain layer of people who do that, usually in a minority. But there's no city on this planet that is immune from things changing that drives people into political activity. And I certainly think in Perth that's possible.
And then there was that moment, I suppose that really signature moment, what Gramsci calls praxis, where I went from the kind of political activist that writes letters and marches down the street and politely asks politicians for changes in policy, to the kind of activist that steps over the pipe, that trespasses, that takes that step towards the police and that says, you will have to go through me to achieve your ends.
It's only overwhelming if you think that it's you against the world. Capitalism is a very flexible system, but it's a system of relationships, economic and power relationships. It's created by human institutions, it can be changed by humans. You seize control of what you can, where you can.
I do get disillusioned, but fortunately, looking at the world around me and just thinking, this is a load of crap. Objectively, I look at it, it's a load of crap. So it's disheartening, but what can you do? I'm going to die on my feet rather than on my knees.
There's a whole range of reasons to continue to be politically active. And certainly one of the reasons is because it is another way of expressing what humanity can be. That persons, and that as humans, we are not always vicious and selfish and violent, but we can be selfless and altruistic and connected to others. So political activism is a way to help redefine what humanity is.
It's all bigger than the individual person, and I think one of the greatest myths that's perpetuated in this society, and it's one of the ways of creating a sort of ideological consensus, is to convince people that their own individual life and experience is the only thing that matters. I think all great thought systems throughout history have been grounded in quite the opposite proposition, that there is something bigger than the individual human being that matters a lot more than. And it doesn't mean that individual human beings don't matter. What it means is there's something bigger than your ego. There is the whole question of humanity and about, the kind of lives that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to live.